very fundamentally that radicalization is born out of desperation.
So this video is specifically talking about Star Wars and Andor, and specifically a YA Star Wars book, which, by the way, Star Wars is space fantasy, so even though this is a fantasy channel and I can talk about Star Wars, because space opera fantasy. But I also wanted to build on this by talking about just the ability of fantasy to express these issues in such a palatable way for like everyday audiences, which is why I personally love fantasy, why it's my favorite genre, right up there with historical fiction. And one thing that you'll see in all of the series that I mentioned in my previous videos is the effect that this kind of like desperation and neediness has. So like you see in A Song of Ice and Fire, Game of Thrones, with the culmination of Robert's rebellion, that kind of rising up, what you see with Daenerys and Slaver's Bay, in terms of Fireborn, with the revolution that overthrew the old dragon riding families, Percy Jackson with Lukey Pookie doing a little shit move. And then, of course, in the Empyrean series with Fen Ryerson doing a rebellion of his own because no one seemed to care about rising magic zombies. Anyway, getting back to my point, is that people ultimately take radical moves when, like, people aren't listening. And how radical they go and whether or not that's actually going to work is not going to be prioritized. Sometimes when people are just like, oh my god, we need to make a change. Oh my god, things are so bad. Like, you know, stuff is hitting the fan. The fan is being hit. And it's so fascinating that such a wide variety of stories is being explored. Now, that's not to say that rebellion is a bad thing. It is a good thing when shit is really hitting the fan. But it's just, you know, with the example that Gemma here is using of Saw Gerrera doing a Saw Gerrera versus, you know, Daenerys Targaryen overthrowing the slave economy of Slaver's Bay, is that, you know, the when, where, why, the when and the why and the how really do matter. And it's always fascinating to see how stories can be built out of that, as well as how it applies to current situations. If you know, you know. This is TikTok. But like, again, genuinely, this element of fantasy, being able to reflect our real world, really is just like so important to me. And regardless, like, of the way that it's explored, it is so important to have that out there. And that is ultimately my why for making this channel, is because I love getting into the nitty-gritty here. I love diving deep. I love thinking about the practicalities of how it applies to our world, and like, I just also really enjoy just being like, insert fantasy character, you are being a dum-dum. Do Revolution better. Anyway, this is Feet, signing off.